Hello! If you have clicked on this video, you're probably wondering how this Goblin Mini cost £165. Well, before I continue with anything else, I'm going to let you know that that was a lie. This Goblin Mini did not actually cost me £165. It actually set me back 166.81 Great British pounds. So, sorry for the lie, clickbait title. But anyway, I'm going to be showing you the entire process of creating this Mini. And I'm going to be explaining the cost of all the tools involved and why this did cost the price that it did. Also, I'm currently in China, so the price I have converted from Chinese RMB to Great British pounds. So first thing in the process of creating our little Goblin Mini there is that, well, we need to create the shape. And how do we do that? We used a 3D printer. The 3D printer I used was the Ender 3 Pro, and this cost me the equivalent of £120 in China. Next, we need the actual model. What will we load into the printer? Now, I didn't make this myself because that would take too long. What I did do was I went on Thingiverse and I found some Goblin miniatures. And this Goblin miniature is by a creator known as Velrock. I've put a link below in the description to his minis. Oh yes, what I should have also mentioned was the filament for this printer cost me the equivalent of £13. So obviously we have the printer, but we need some material to print. So with the Mini selected, I need to load that into a slicer. I used Cura. After it has gone through Cura, it is ready to print. Now I did do two prints of these. One I just did with basic supports. And it did not turn out well. One of the arms was not supported enough, so I printed it again with tree supports. And here you can see the difference between our basic support model and our tree support model. Now, tree supports aren't necessarily better. It depends what you're printing, what angle you're printing at, and whether or not you will need them. Tree supports don't work for everything, so you need to decide that yourself. Then it comes on to the process of removing the supports, and these are the tools I used. So I used a pair of pliers. They cost me 40p. I got them at the local supermarket. Yay China, it's cheap. Next, I used some cutters, but these cutters came with my printer. But if you did want to buy them yourself, it would cost you £1. I haven't included the price in this video because I didn't buy them. And then finally a set of files. So after we pull off the supports, we may get little zits around the model or little excess pieces of plastic, little excess pieces of PLA, and a set of files. These cost me £1.50. So usually I try and pull it off with the pliers. With the pliers, be very careful. It's very easy to pull too hard and pull something off such as a leg. However, if you do find that you do end up with broken models or broken pieces, don't necessarily throw them away. You can always use them later on for example, another major project. So let's say this print's been successful, but it's missing the arm. Well, I can always use the head, and maybe I can put that on the side of a Paladin miniature. So we can always use these parts again. I then usually go in with the cutters, and normally I'll just cut in and around. So anything that's big and coming off, it's very easy to snip. I could use an X-Acto knife, but I don't have one of those, like a box cutter. But then for the smaller ones, I'll just file them away with the files. If we do have any breakages, it's actually very easy to fix. If I ever break something, I have some super glue. This super glue costs me 11p. Extremely cheap. When I was working on this Goblin Mini and filing it, the bottom of the spear broke off, which is not ideal, but you don't want to spend another hour reprinting it. So I just used a bit of super glue and then use a toothpick just to wipe off any excess. The toothpicks as well, the toothpicks cost me 30p. Now you may look at the print and think it's not very good because there is lots of stringing there. That's more my fault because I haven't got my settings dialed in properly. But anyway, even though there's lots of stringing and it means I may need to do lots of filing and cleanup, the filing and cleanup is actually pretty relaxing. Sometimes put on a TV show and I'll just file away and make it nice and smooth. Once we have the Mini how we want it, we then also need to glue it to a base. The base I just printed out on my printer again. I prefer to print out the Mini and the base separately because if the Mini has a problem printing, I don't want to have wasted material printing out a base only for it to then fail. So once we have that done, we then need to paint it, but before we paint it, we need to prime. And I primed this using a black Mr. Hobby. Now, Mr. Hobby is spray paint which you can easily get in China. It's a Japanese brand and it's most commonly used for Gundams, and Gundams are extremely popular here. Stuff like Vallejo, Army Paint and Citadel spray cans are much more expensive, so this one only cost me £5. But there were a couple of other things I used. I did buy some blue tack. The blue tack cost me around £1. And then the blue tack is used to attach to a stick. We put the miniature on the stick. We then hold the stick out and then we spray onto the miniature on the stick so that we're not getting as much paint on ourselves. This stick, I found it in my bathroom of my flat when I moved in. So that's free. So anyway, with my piece of wood and blue tack and spray in place, I went up to the roof. And then this is my first time painting and priming a miniature, so I'm not too sure what the spray painting process was like. Now, spraying on the roof, it was quite unpredictable where I was spraying because the wind was blowing, so sometimes I would spray and it was hard to get the paint to go where I wanted. So I think next time I go up to the roof, I may do it in the doorway so there's less wind impacting my line of spray. But if I go to do this again, I'm definitely going to buy a mask and gloves. So anyway, with everything primed again, I brought it all back downstairs, and the best thing about priming is if there's still any little parts or extra bits of plastic that I didn't pick up the first time, they are much more clear and easy to tell on the silhouette of the model. So before I started painting again, I was able to just once again go around with my clippers and file any extra residue that was left when printing. So the paints, which paints did I use? Well, the paints I used were Vallejo Paints. They cost me in total around £20. What I did was I went onto Taobao and I was looking at a basic set. Just your standard starter paint set with all the paints you may need. However, that was looking to cost around £60. Whereas I found if I bought them individually, it would only cost me around £20. And I could also choose not to get some of the colours. So I think the colours that are normally in the starter set of Buff and Azure, which is like a light purple violet thing, I didn't get those because apparently they're more niche colours and I thought I wouldn't really use them. One of the colours I didn't get from the starter set was this yellow orchard one, but that's just because it was sold out. And then we also needed some painting supplies. So my painting supplies were, let me have a look. Yes, paper towels for wiping out brushes, paper towels, £1, 2 big rolls. Brushes, I just bought some cheap brushes, that cost me £1.50. I also 3D printed a paintbrush holder. So that was convenient, so I didn't have to buy that because I've got the printer. I bought a standard palette, it only cost 50p. I then bought a wet palette because they're highly recommended. The wet palette, it's very basic, it's very cheap, but it's got everything I need. It was £2.50 because pretty much if I went to buy a box and then a sponge to cut and then some grease paper, it would have probably cost me around the same anyway. But yes, I've got a palette and a wet palette. The normal palette is for my metallic paints because it's got all the glitter and stuff in those, and you don't want those bleeding in or going into your other paints or messing up the pigment. The main complaint with the wet palette though was the one I was using was extremely deep. I don't feel like it had to be that deep, so that was the main disadvantage of this. So anyway, with all that in place, I then started painting. So the painting process took me about 3 hours because this is the first mini I've ever painted. Well, in like 10 years. When I was like 12 to 13, I did paint some Lord of the Rings Warhammer. But yeah, so I started going on just all the base colours. The first thing I painted on was the eyes. So I put on the white and then I painted the green around the white so that I didn't have to paint the eyes exactly. I took a really long time putting base colours on because I was extremely cautious. I wasn't sure what I was doing. And then when I had all the base colours on, I was quite dissatisfied because I was like, oh, this doesn't look great. But then the moment I've got the wet palette, I was able to start blending paints together, putting on lighter tones, lighter shades, changing colours slightly. And then I just kept building up over and over and over, and the final result did look good. Now, unfortunately, I didn't use any washers because I was going to buy a black wash, but currently the sellers I searched for on Taobao, they were sold out of all the black washers they had available. But one of my friends has made a suggestion that maybe I should go ahead and try and get some Gundam panel liner fluid, because Gundam's popular in China, so I may have to get liner fluid instead of a wash. And hey, if I use a wash, this may look better. But most of the washers selling online, they were selling online for around £2, but I was not able to buy that. So, all in all, that's the entire process of creating my Goblin Mini. Is it worth it? Yes and no, it depends who you are. If you're going to get an entire setup just for one mini, no, it's not worth it. But like many hobbies, there's a high startup cost, and then if you're going to use that more and use it quite a lot, whereas in this case, creating multiple goblins, this one costs around £165, but if I did a second, it would cost around £83, a third one £55, and a fourth one £42 per model. But the more you do, the cost is much lower because you're using your existing materials, and this is how well production works. That's why Games Workshop, the stuff is quite expensive, because they put all this money into molds and machinery, and then you say, oh, this Games Workshop Mini only cost what, 10 pence of plastic? Yes, but all that upfront costs of an equipment, that's what makes it high priced. So even though this technically may cost 10 pence in materials, maybe 20 pence in materials, the cost of buying the equipment to make it doesn't mean that the resources are the only cost. But yes, for me, I think it's definitely worth it. I'm going to be going ahead and jumping into more miniature painting in the future. And also it's great that we are in an age where I can literally print my own model. I can then prime it, paint it, and then if I play D&D or something, I can use it. So if you did enjoy, let me know down in the comments. If you have any tips on how I can be better, things I did wrong, things I did weird with my painting, feel free to give critique and feedback. Like for example, I didn't do a base on this goblin. Bases are something I'm going to need to work on in the future. If you did like the video, throw it a like and subscribe if you want to see more of me in the future. I may be doing more mini stuff, but I also do gaming and nerd culture related stuff as well. But anyway, thank you for watching my rambling on of how this Goblin Mini costs so much if you only look at tools and materials costs and you don't just look at the plastic value. So thank you for watching and goodbye.